When parental love becomes weakness, you might be creating the very disrespect you'll suffer in the future, and you don't even realize it. Freud has a brutal explanation for this. Picture this: Margaret, 72 years old, sits alone in her apartment. On Christmas morning, her phone hasn't rung. Her children, now successful adults, are too busy with their own lives to visit. When she calls them, they respond with impatience, as if her need for connection is an inconvenience. This is the same woman who sacrificed everything for them, who never said no, who gave them everything they wanted to avoid any conflict. How did we get here? How does unconditional love turn into conditional respect? Before we dive deep into this painful reality, make sure to subscribe if you want to understand the hidden psychology behind family dynamics. Hit that notification bell, because what Freud discovered about parenting will challenge everything you think you know about love and respect. The answer lies in one of psychology's most uncomfortable truths: excessive permissiveness from parents, especially driven by guilt or fear of rejection, can create narcissistic, selfish, and emotionally immature children. And Freud saw this coming over a century ago, taught what Freud really said about raising children. Let's start with what Freud actually believed about parent-child relationships, because most people get this completely wrong. Freud didn't hate parents or children. What he discovered was that healthy psychological development requires something most modern. Parents are terrified to provide boundaries, limits, and yes, the word that makes everyone uncomfortable: authority. Think of it like this: imagine the human psyche as a wild garden. Without proper boundaries, without someone establishing where things can and cannot grow, that garden becomes chaotic, invasive, and ultimately destructive to itself. Freud's famous Oedipus complex isn't just about weird childhood attractions. It's about the fundamental need for children to encounter limits. The child naturally wants everything, wants to be the center of the universe, wants immediate gratification. This is normal. What's not normal is when parents never challenge this fantasy. Here's where it gets interesting. Freud believed that parents must occupy what he called the symbolic place of law and authority, not friendship, not submission, authority. Why? Because children don't just need love, they need structure to organize their psyche around. Without this structure, they remain trapped in what Freud called primary narcissism, the belief that the world revolves around them. Picture the parent as a lighthouse. The lighthouse doesn't move toward the ships to make them feel better. It stands firm, provides guidance, and lets ships navigate around it. When parents abandon their lighthouse position to become floating buoys that move wherever the child's emotions pull them, everyone gets lost. The danger of parental guilt. No, let's talk about the emotion that's destroying modern families: guilt. Have you ever seen a parent apologize to their 5-year-old for setting a bedtime? Or negotiate with a toddler about eating vegetables like they're conducting international diplomacy? This is guilt in action. Here's what happens psychologically. Parents become afraid that setting limits will damage their child's love for them, so they flip the natural hierarchy upside down. Instead of the child needing to earn the parent's approval, the parent desperately seeks the child's approval. Freud would call this a catastrophic reversal of roles. Think about it like this: imagine if a country's laws changed based on whether criminals like those laws. The entire system would collapse, because the people who most need boundaries are the ones least capable of setting them for themselves. When parents operate from guilt, they're essentially telling their children, your emotional comfort is more important than learning respect, responsibility, or resilience. The child's unconscious mind receives this message loud and clear: I am so powerful that even the adults in my life are afraid of my disapproval. This creates what Freud called a grandiose self, a psychological structure where the child believes they deserve special treatment, that rules don't apply to them, and that other people exist primarily to serve their needs. But here's the cruel irony. Children raised this way don't actually feel loved. They feel anxious and insecure because deep down, they know something is wrong when the people who are supposed to guide them are instead following them. Overprotection. The Velvet Prison. Let's examine overprotection through Freud's lens, because this is where many well-meaning parents completely lose the plot. Overprotection isn't love. It's often a parent's unconscious way of managing their own anxiety about their child's development. When parents remove every obstacle, solve every problem, and shield their children from every disappointment, they're not protecting them. They're creating psychological invalids. Freud understood that children need to experience what he called optimal frustration. This doesn't mean being cruel or neglectful. It means allowing children to encounter age-appropriate challenges, so their ego, their sense of self, can develop strength and resilience. Think of it like building muscle. Muscles don't grow from comfort, they grow from resistance. The psychological muscles of patience, empathy, gratitude, and respect only develop when children encounter situations that require these qualities. When parents constantly rescue their children from natural consequences, they're sending a dangerous message: you're not capable of handling life's basic challenges. The child's unconscious mind translates this as, I must be so fragile and special that normal rules don't apply to me. But there's something even more insidious happening. Overprotective parents often use their children's dependence to feel needed and important. It becomes a psychological transaction. I'll make you helpless or you'll always need me, and I'll feel valuable. Freud would recognize this as a form of unconscious emotional incest, not sexual, but a boundary violation where the parent uses the child to meet their own emotional needs, rather than preparing the child for independence, adult consequences. The psychological debt comes due. We reach the part that breaks parents' hearts. What happens when these overindulged children become adults? Remember, the human psyche is like a computer program. The code written in childhood continues running in adulthood, usually without conscious awareness. Children who were never required to consider their parents' needs, never had to wait for what they wanted, never faced real consequences for their actions. These children grow up with a fundamental expectation that the world should continue operating this way. But here's where reality gets brutal. The world doesn't care about their childhood programming. These adult children often struggle with what psychologists call emotional regulation. They never learn to manage disappointment because their parents managed it for them. They never developed empathy because they never had to consider anyone else's feelings. They never learned gratitude because everything was given freely without appreciation required. And here's the cruelest irony of all. These adult children often resent their parents precisely because they were overindulged. Deep down, they sense that something is wrong with them, that they're not prepared for life. And unconsciously, they blame the people who failed to prepare them. Freud called this the return of the repressed. All that energy that should have gone into developing character, resilience, and emotional maturity doesn't just disappear. It comes back as anxiety, depression, relationship problems, and yes, resentment toward the parents who loved them wrong. You've probably seen this in action. Adult children who speak to their parents with shocking disrespect, who make demands rather than requests, who seem incapable of recognizing their parents as human beings with their own needs and limitations. These aren't evil people. They're psychologically stunted people operating from the emotional blueprint Their parents installed in childhood. The aging parent's nightmare. This brings us to perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this psychological drama. What happens to parents when they reach old age? Picture this scenario. You've spent 30 years prioritizing your child's happiness above everything else. You've said yes when you should have said no. You've given when you should have required earning. You've apologized when you should have stood firm. Now you're 70, maybe dealing with health issues, maybe facing loneliness or financial stress. You reach out to these children you sacrificed everything for, and what do you find? Impatience, inconvenience, maybe even cruelty. Freud would say this isn't coincidence. It's the inevitable result of a psychological equation that was imbalanced from the beginning. Here's what happens psychologically. Children who never learn to see their parents as separate human beings with their own needs don't suddenly develop this ability in adulthood. To them, parents exist in a category Freud might call need-meeting objects rather than full human beings, deserving of respect and care. When aging parents can no longer meet their adult children's needs, when they become the ones requiring care and attention, these adult children often experience what feels like betrayal. The unconscious message is, you're supposed to take care of me, not the other way around. This is why you see adult children who seem genuinely shocked and resentful when their parents need help. They never develop the psychological capacity to see their parents as anything other than service providers. And the aging parents, they're trapped in a prison of their own making. They can't suddenly demand respect they never required. They can't set boundaries with people they trained to ignore boundaries. They're reaping the psychological harvest of seeds they planted decades earlier. Freud's solution: the courage to be disliked. So, what would Freud prescribe for this epidemic of disrespectful adult children and heartbroken aging parents? The answer is both simple and terrifying for most modern parents. You must be willing to be temporarily disliked by your children in order to be permanently respected by them. Freud believed that healthy parent-child relationships require what he called symbolic castration, not literal, but psychological. This means parents must be willing to disappoint their children, to set limits that cause temporary distress, to maintain their authority even when children resist. Think of it this way: every time you give in to avoid your child's displeasure, you're making a trade. You're trading their temporary discomfort for your future relationship with them. You're trading their character development for momentary peace. But here's what most parents don't understand. Children unconsciously want you to maintain boundaries. When you consistently give in, you're not showing love, you're showing weakness. And children lose respect for weakness even if they can't articulate this feeling. Freud would say that love without limits isn't love at all. It's a form of psychological neglect. You're neglecting your duty to prepare your child for a world that won't indulge their every whim. Real love, according to Freud, looked like this: I care about you so much that I'm willing to endure your temporary anger to help you develop into a person capable of healthy relationships and genuine achievement. This doesn't mean being harsh or cruel. It means being consistently firm about important matters. It means saying no and meaning it. It means requiring respect and courtesy as non-negotiable basics. It means not apologizing for reasonable rules and expectations. The practical application. Let me translate this into practical terms, because Freud's insights are useless if they can't be applied. If you're currently raising children, here's what Freudian parenting actually looks like. You set clear expectations and maintain them consistently, even when your child is upset. You don't negotiate with tantrums. You don't apologize for reasonable rules. You require basic courtesy and respect as non-negotiable elements of family life. When your child says, "I hate you," because you set a limit, You don't chase after them to repair the relationship immediately. You let them experience the natural discomfort of having boundaries, knowing that this discomfort is building psychological muscle. You show love through consistency, not through constant giving. You demonstrate care by preparing them for independence, not by making them dependent on your approval or services. And here's the hardest part. You accept that. Your child might not thank you for this until they're adults themselves. You parent for the relationship you want to have with them when they're 35, not for the peace you want when they're 8. If you're dealing with adult children who already show signs of this psychological damage, Freud would say it's not too late, but it requires courage. You must begin setting boundaries now, even if it causes conflict. You must stop apologizing for having needs. You must require basic respect as a condition of relationship. Yes, this might cause temporary distance. Yes, they might be angry, but the alternative is a lifetime of being treated as a servant rather than a parent. The deeper truth is what Freud really understood about families that most people miss. Respect isn't something you can demand or beg for in adulthood. Respect is something you must build systematically through years of consistent, loving authority. The parents sitting alone in nursing homes, wondering why their children never call, often have their answer in how they responded to their 3-year-olds. First tantrum, did they maintain loving authority, or did they negotiate their way out of discomfort? The adult children who speak rudely to their aging parents aren't necessarily bad people. They're people operating from a psychological program that says my needs and feelings are more important than anyone else's, including the people who sacrifice for me. This is the tragic irony of permissive parenting in trying to guarantee their children's love. These parents actually prevent their children from developing the psychological capacity for genuine love and gratitude. Because here's what Freud knew. Real love requires the ability to see other people as separate, valuable human beings with their own needs and limitations. Children who are never required to consider their parents' needs never develop this crucial psychological skill. So, let me ask you, what kind of relationship do you want with your children when you're 70? Do you want to be someone they call out of obligation? Someone they see as a burden? Someone they speak to with impatience? Or do you want to be someone they genuinely respect? Someone they enjoy spending time with? Someone they see as a wise and valuable human being? The choice you make today in how you respond to your child's demands, tantrums, and tests of authority is determining their future relationship. Freud's message isn't about being harsh or unloving. It's about understanding that real love sometimes requires being temporarily disliked. It's about having the courage to prepare your children for a world that won't revolve around them. The parents who are truly loving are the ones willing to endure their children's displeasure now to ensure their children's character development and their own dignity later. Your children don't need another friend. They have plenty of friends. What they need is a parent. Someone willing to occupy the difficult but necessary position of loving authority. The question is, do you have the courage to love them that much? What do you think? Does this resonate with your experience of family dynamics? Have you seen this pattern play out in your own life or in families around you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this video opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, share it with other parents who might need to hear this message. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is tell each other hard truths. Until next time, remember, understanding your mind is the first step to changing your life.